Yes, and that could very well. Plus, by the way, there's also environmental factors. A few years ago, well, several years ago, they were going to make the Scottish red deer a different species than the mainland European red deer because it was so small. It was so much smaller than the regular European red deer. And the antlers of those deers get to be really huge, but not the Scottish red deer. It had especially small antlers on a small body. So they were going to give it a new species name, but then some settlers to New Zealand took some Scottish red deer with them. And when they got out in New Zealand, they said, at last, none of this cold Scottish prairie. I'm in New Zealand, you know. And the offspring of those runt red deer grew to full size with a full set of antlers. And so their environment was limiting the expression of their genetic potential. And so you could have, in other words, I've always wondered, see, research is hard work. That's why I try to get students to do the work. But equisetum, you know, is a little plant, grows about as big around as your finger, you know, about so tall. But it looks like the twig of a fossil tree called a calamite or calamites. And I've wondered, is it a separate created kind, equisetum, or is it a runt calamite? That if you could find the right growing conditions to simulate pre-flood growing conditions, could you take equisetum spores and grow a calamite tree from them? And it's easy to say experiments. It's hard to do them. But I still think that it'd be worth doing. And I keep hoping, you know, some student somewhere will grab that idea, you know, and try it. Now, it works on some things. You know, if you were living in the tundra, you would think of the willow, you know, as a little tree about like that, you know, that grew kind of flat against the ground, you know, leading away from the wind, and, you know, never got any taller than that. But you can actually dig one of those up and bring it down here to Colorado and plant it in the spring. It'll just take off. You know, pretty soon it'll be a regular willow tree. And so the genes are still there. They're just not able to express themselves in that environment. So a lot of size and shape are, you know, readily changed by environmental stimuli. Color can be affected, you know, by environmental stimuli. So you can have some of those things. Some of the things we see now may actually be the reduced size of some of the giants that once were. And if we had the proper conditions, they would once again demonstrate their full genetic potential. You know, lots of experiments possible, yes. Radiocarbon date what? They haven't caught on, but Dr. Baumgartner did. Okay, so tomorrow the first science talk, will be by Dr. John Baumgartner on carbon-14. See, an evolutionist, even when he sees, in fact, Discover Magazine did a write-up on this, you know, these fresh blood cells, fresh bone cells, stretchable blood vessels. I mean, that's a lot of information, you know, in this T-Rex bone. And so Discover Magazine, see, is that put out by is that a Christian magazine? Oh, no, that's the evolution. And they're just a big mouth. Oh, let's see. What was that? Discovery News? I was talking about Discover Magazine, which is really, you know, pushes evolution in a big way. So they're trying to report on this because it's interesting, but they don't want people to get the wrong idea that this might suggest that T-Rex is not, you know, 65 or more million years old. These were supposed to be 80 million years old. And so right up front, they say, you know, finding these blood cells, you know, has fostered speculation among religious fanatics that the earth is young. And says, Dr. Mary Schweitzer says, well, I'm a Christian, and I don't like the way people have been personally attacking me and sending me letters that I should recant, you know. And Christians are just awful people that are just, you know, now she didn't say that. That was the end of her quote. But the magazine, see, instead of dealing with the issue, you know, they're saying, well, Christians are just horrible. Think of the way they've treated a fellow Christian woman by assuming that she's holding back the evidence that would really support a young earth. And so they babble on about that a while, hoping you've forgotten the initial question, well, does this mean that T-Rex fossils are not that old and they form very rapidly? And so and then later on in the article, it's just so much fun to read these things. And then later on in the article, Mary Schweitzer says, in the lab, if you put blood in a test tube and set it on a shelf, it decomposes. It's junk in a week. Oh, okay. Isn't it neat that other stuff lasted 80 million years? So the inside of a T-Rex bone in Montana is a much better, incubator for holding blood than the lab would be. They just leave themselves wide open to criticism, but they tend to and then if they try to bring up Christians in a negative context. So to keep anybody else from bringing up the point, even though they didn't answer it. And so Dr. Baumgartner went a step further. According to carbon-14 has a short half-life. And so it'll all be gone in a few thousand years. So no evolutionist would try to use carbon-14 on a dinosaur bone or anything, even 1 million years old, because there wouldn't be any there. So why spend the